So, I pulled into Claire's driveway that cold November afternoon, the river fog rolling low over the neighborhood. My heart jumped before the car stopped. There it was, Charles's old blue Ford, parked too neatly at the curb. He had told me he was across town helping a friend fix a furnace. Why was his truck here? My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The heater hummed, blowing air that smelled faintly of burnt dust. My breath caught. I turned off the ignition, but the ticking of the engine seemed loud in the silence. My chest pressed tight as if a warning bell was sounding. I stepped out. The November air bit sharp against my cheeks, colder than the wind off the Mississippi. Dry leaves crunched beneath my shoes as I moved closer. I told myself maybe Charles just dropped something off. Maybe I was imagining the shift in his voice last night when I asked about dinner plans. The kitchen window was cracked open. I heard her voice first. "Claire, my only daughter, fragile after surgery." She whispered, her tone more urgent than tender. "If Mom signs over the house, you'll finally be free." A pause. Then Charles answered, his laugh slow and low, the one he used to charm bankers and friends. "She won't even notice. She trusts me. By Christmas, the deed will be ours." My knees trembled. My hand reached out, steadying against the cold brick. It was the same wall I once leaned on while carrying Claire inside as a newborn, bundled in a yellow blanket. That memory clashed hard with the sound of her voice now, scheming to erase me. I wanted to scream, to push the door wide open and confront them both. But my throat locked tight. My heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning out reason. The smell of roasting chicken drifted through the window. Ordinary, domestic. And yet every note of that scent pierced like betrayal. Charles spoke again. "All those years she worked double shifts. She thinks it means loyalty. It just means she's tired?" Claire giggled softly. "She won't see it coming." My jaw clenched so hard I felt a tooth shift. The air tasted of metal, or maybe it was just the blood where I bit my tongue. For a moment, the world tilted. I saw not my husband and my daughter but two strangers, plotting to strip me of the only security I had left. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My fingers shook, but I pressed record. Their voices spilled into my memory chip like venom caught in a vial. I thought of all the nights I had folded laundry until my back ached. All the double shifts at the hospital, my feet blistered inside white shoes, just so this family could have comfort. Now I stood outside invisible, treated as a hurdle to clear. A burden. The words sliced through me. Burden. At 68, after everything I had poured out, they saw me as nothing but an obstacle. My vision blurred. The fog seemed thicker. I heard Claire laugh again and imagined her face. The same freckles I kissed when she was 6, now twisted with greed. My husband's familiar voice, once my anchor, turned foreign and sharp. I backed away from the window, afraid they might see me, but they were too wrapped up in their plans. Back in my car I sat still. The upholstery smelled faintly of old coffee, the kind Charles used to spill every morning on his way to work. I stared at the steering wheel, leather cracked with years of use. My hand rested there, cold and trembling. I could not cry yet. The tears lodged behind my eyes, waiting for a safer place. I thought of my mother's words long ago. When folks show you their truth, believe it the first time. I had ignored too many signs. Tonight there was no ignoring. The betrayal was clear, carved into me with every word I had just recorded. The house I fought to pay off. The nights I traded sleep for security. The years I gave so my daughter would never feel less. All of it now a target, mapped out by the very people who should have protected me. I gripped my phone tighter. Proof. Quiet justice begins with proof. The clock on the dashboard blinked 40:37 p.m. The fog thickened as if the river itself was holding its breath. I started the engine, but before shifting into gear, I looked back at that house one last time. My house. My family. My undoing. I whispered into the silence, "You think I'm weak. You have no idea." As I drove away, my eyes caught the holiday lights beginning to twinkle along the street. Families inside sat down to warm dinners, voices mingling with clinking silverware. But for me, Thanksgiving would never be the same. And neither would justice. I remember the smell of rubbing alcohol, sharp clean, comforting to some, but to me it was the scent of endless night shifts. I spent 35 years as a nurse, moving between ICU rooms and maternity wards, holding hands of strangers while my own family slept without me. My feet ached, but I kept smiling. "Mum, when will you be home?" Claire's voice used to come through the kitchen phone. I could hear cartoons buzzing in the background. My chest tightened each time. "Soon, baby. I'll be home before you wake." It was a lie I told so often I almost believed it. Nursing wasn't just a job. It was a piece of me, Every IV drip, every whispered prayer with families, those became threads in my fabric. I sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas mornings. While others unwrapped gifts, I unwrapped gauze pads, checking wounds that would not close. One Thanksgiving stands out. Snow piled high in Madison, the streets so quiet you could hear wind whistle through frozen trees. I had packed a small pie in my work bag, hoping to sneak a bite with the night shift crew. Claire was 9. She had drawn me a turkey with crayons, its feathers lopsided, colors bleeding outside the lines. "For your desk, Mom. So you're not alone." That paper turkey stayed pinned to my locker for 20 years. And yet no one ever saw those sacrifices. To Claire, I was just the mom who arrived late. To my husband, Richard, I was the woman who fell asleep on the couch instead of watching football. To the neighbors, I was the woman with tired eyes who waved but never joined cookouts. I thought it was worth it. Every paycheck went to braces, school trips, the down payment on our home. I skipped vacations so Claire could study abroad. When Richard lost his job, I doubled shifts. I told myself family first, always. But memory has a cruel way of circling back. I recall Richard leaning against the counter one evening. He tapped a pile of bills. "Don't you ever get tired of being the mule? Always working, always paying?" His laugh was thin, sharp. I laughed with him, though inside I broke. Because yes, I was tired. But quitting wasn't an option. Fast forward years later, Claire's graduation. The auditorium smelled of roses and hairspray. I clapped so hard my palms burned. When she crossed the stage, our eyes met. She smiled, but it was brief, distracted. Richard's hand gripped her shoulder tighter than mine ever had. I swallowed the achy and told myself, she's happy, that's enough. But happiness didn't last. Claire married young. Rachel came into her life and mine. With her, distance grew. Suddenly, my cooking was too heavy, my visits too much, my questions too nosy. I became a guest in my own daughter's world. And Richard, his silences turned longer, his absences sharper. Work trips, late nights, excuses. The man who once carried me to bed after shifts now carried secrets I couldn't name. I brushed it aside. A nurse knows how to patch wounds. But some wounds bleed beneath the surface, unseen until too late. Now, when I think back to those years, it feels like watching an old film reel. Flickering images, Claire's sticky fingers from cotton candy at the county fair. Richard's hand warm on mine during church hymns. My own laugh, rare but genuine. The reel plays, but the colors fade. And here I am, 68, standing at my daughter's doorstep, watching Richard's truck parked where it should not be. All those nights I gave, all the years I bent myself thin, they led to this moment of betrayal. I pressed my palm against the cold wooden rail of the porch. My heart beat like it used to before code, blue calls in the hospital. Only now, it wasn't a stranger's life on the line. It was mine. Do sacrifices mean anything if the people you gave them to erase you? That question echoes louder than monitors in an ICU. I thought of the paper turkey. I thought of every pie that cooled on the counter, untouched because I was gone. I thought of every smile I forced while my chest cracked with exhaustion. And then, as voices drifted from inside Claire's house, low and intimate, the truth sliced sharper than any scalpel. I had given everything, and in return, I had been written out. The air smelled of wood smoke. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds, cruel in their indifference to the chaos in my chest. I leaned closer, straining to hear through the door. Laughter, a clink of glasses, and Richard's voice, steady, comfortable, at home. I closed my eyes, felt my knees weaken. My life's work wasn't saving patients anymore. It was surviving the shattering of trust from the two people I had lived for. Should I knock? Should I walk away? Should I burst in and demand the truth? My hand hovered near the doorframe. And I leave you with this. Should I keep quiet about what I saw, or should I confront them? The dining room smelled of roasted ham and cloves. A faint sweetness from the glaze hung heavy in the air, but I tasted only salt from the tears I swallowed down. Claire had invited me to dinner that Sunday. "Just us, Mom," she'd said on the phone. Her voice almost warm, like when she was a girl. I told myself maybe things were mending. Maybe last week's betrayal was just a nightmare I had dreamed. But when I stepped through the door, Richard was already there, carving meat as if he belonged more than I did. His truck still sat outside. My pulse quickened, but I forced a smile, clutching the pie I had baked, apple with cinnamon. The way Claire used to love it. "Smells good," I said softly, setting it down. Claire didn't meet my eyes. "We already have dessert." The words were casual, almost nothing. But they sliced. She didn't even glance at the pie, didn't touch the pan. My hands lingered on it as if warmth could shield me. I sat at the table. Forks scraped plates, glasses clinked. Richard laughed at something Claire whispered. I tried to catch fragments, but all I heard was the roar in my own ears. I remembered Thanksgiving when Claire was 10, her freckles lit by candlelight, and she had begged me for just one more slice of apple pie. Now she ignored the dish completely as if it carried no history. "Mom, could you pass the bread?" Claire asked finally. Relieved at the smallest recognition, I reached across. My sleeve brushed the butter dish. It tipped, wobbling, a pat of butter sliding to the cloth. I gasped softly. Richard's voice cut sharp. "Careful, Evelyn. We don't want a mess tonight." I froze. The way he said my name, it wasn't husband to wife. It was teacher to child. Claire snorted a laugh, quick and cruel, and I felt heat burn my cheeks. I whispered, "I'm sorry." Claire pushed her chair back with a screech of wood on tile. "Goodness, Mom. You can't even pass bread without spilling something. Maybe it's time you admit you can't keep up anymore?" The room went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. My chest tightened. I wanted to remind her of the nights I cleaned her sheets when she was sick, of the lunches packed before dawn, of the mortgage payments scraped together with aching hands. Instead, I stared at the butter melting into the cloth, yellow seeping like a stain that would never wash out. Richard chuckled, low and satisfied. "She's right, everyone slows down. Nothing to be ashamed of. Just step back. Let us handle things now, step back." The phrase landed heavier than any blow. Step back from what? My own life. The home I built. The years I gave away. I looked at Claire. She smoothed her napkin as if the moment was already past, as if her words hadn't gutted me. My daughter, my blood, had spoken them without flinching. The ham on my plate had gone cold. The smell of cloves, once sweet, now cloying. My stomach churned, I sipped water, but even that tasted metallic. Richard cleared his throat. "Speaking of handling things, Claire, and I were thinking it might be easier if you let us take over the bills, keep things simple for you." There it was. The thread pulled tighter. I set my glass down carefully, afraid it would slip from my hand. "Simple for me," I echoed. My voice was barely a whisper. Claire looked up, her eyes sharp. "Don't take it the wrong way. We just don't want you stressed. You've done enough, Mom. Really, time to rest." Done enough. Time to rest. Words meant to sound kind, but twisted with greed. They saw me not as a woman who had built their world, but as a stumbling burden to be managed. I pushed back my chair slowly. The legs groaned against the floor. My heart pounded in my ears, each beat a question: speak now or stay silent. I thought of the recording on my phone, their voices conspiring, proof of betrayal waiting in my pocket. I imagined slamming the device on the table, pressing play, forcing their faces to blanch. But I didn't. Not yet. The timing wasn't right. Instead, I gathered my coat. The scent of apple pie still clung to my hands, sweet and mocking. I turned to the door, head held higher than my knees felt. "Leaving already?" Richard asked. I didn't answer. My throat was thick with unshed words. The door closed behind me with a dull thud. The evening air was cold, sharp, cleaner than the poisoned warmth inside. I breathed deep, steadying. My house key jingled faintly in my pocket, a reminder of what was still mine. On the porch, I paused. My phone was still there. My proof. My path to justice. But the question hung heavy, clawing at my ribs. Should I confront them now, or should I wait, let them believe I was broken? The clock on the mantel ticked louder than it should have. Each second dropped like a hammer in the silence of my living room. Claire sat across from me on the sofa, legs crossed, a stack of papers balanced on her knee. Richard hovered near the window, his hands tucked in his pockets as if he owned the place. "Mom, it's just easier this way," Claire said. Her voice was sugar, too smooth. "All the bills in one account. We'll handle them. You won't need to worry." She slid the papers toward me. The scent of ink and fresh print rose faintly. My fingers brushed the edge. Smooth, cold, legal. I didn't pick them up. Instead, I looked at her. My daughter. Freckles faded with age, but still there if you searched close. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Richard spoke. "You're tired, Evelyn. No shame in that. Let us carry the load." I thought of the laundry loads I carried for decades, folded neat, while my back throbbed. The mortgage payments I scraped from double shifts. Now they called it carrying the load. But what they wanted was control. I lifted the first page. My eyes blurred for a moment, but the bold print snapped into focus. Authorization to transfer primary account holder. My breath snagged. I flipped another page. Words like consent, liability, power of attorney. My stomach knotted. "Why now?" My voice was low, but it trembled. Claire smiled, tilting her head like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. "Because it's time, Mom. You've done enough. Let us take care of you." The phrase repeated done enough. My pulse thudded in my temples. I set the papers down slowly. "I can pay my bills," Richard chuckled, leaning against the sill. "Until you miss something. Then the lights go out, or worse, we're only protecting you." Protecting me. The words curled bitter in my mouth. I reached for my teacup. The porcelain was warm, chamomile steeped too long. I sipped, but the taste was stale. My hand trembled as I set it back, the cup rattling against the saucer. Claire's gaze sharpened. "Mom, just sign. It'll save everyone stress." I studied her. Her nails were painted pale pink, the color I once brushed on her small hands for fun, both of us giggling on the porch steps. Now those hands held the pen out to me. The pen gleamed black, heavy with expectation. I didn't take it. Instead, I opened the drawer of the side table, pulled out my checkbook. I flipped through the register, each line of ink like a diary of my years. Electric bill, grocery store, gas station, steady, careful entries. Then my hand froze. A withdrawal larger than any I had written, dated 2 weeks back, $4,000. My chest tightened. I flipped again. Another. Not mine. Not my handwriting. I looked up sharply. Richard turned away, whistling low, staring out the window as if birdsong mattered more than my gaze. Claire smoothed her skirt, her cheeks flushing. My voice cracked. "Who touched my account?" Silence. The mantel clock ticked louder, drilling the seconds into the air. My throat burned. "Answer me." Claire's jaw tightened. "It was for bills." "You wouldn't understand the transfers?" "Bills. $4,000. Transfers I never made?" My vision swam, but I steadied it. "I understand numbers," I said. "I understand theft." Richard spun, his tone clipped. "Don't use words like that. We're your family." "Family?" The word rang hollow. Family doesn't take what you earned in nights of exhaustion. Family doesn't slip into accounts like thieves in daylight. I closed the checkbook carefully, my hands steadier than my insides. "No one touches this again." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Mom, don't make this harder." I stood. My knees creaked, but I straightened tall. "I'm not the one making it hard." The room felt smaller, air thick with paper and lies. My skin prickled. I clutched the checkbook to my chest like armor. Richard stepped closer. "You'll regret being stubborn." I looked at him, at the lines deepening around his mouth, the arrogance in his eyes. Then at Claire, her face guarded, lips pressed thin. The people I had trusted most now stood before me like wolves circling prey. I forced a smile, maybe. But I've survived regret before. I walked to the door, heart pounding. Their whispers followed me, sharp and urgent, but I didn't turn. My hand wrapped the doorknob, cool metal biting into my palm. Outside, the evening wind carried the scent of wet leaves and chimney smoke. I gulped it in, cleansing, steadying. My phone vibrated in my pocket, bank alert. I pulled it out. Suspicious activity detected. My chest thudded. I clicked. Another withdrawal. Today, while I sat inside, they were still taking. My hand tightened around the phone. The proof was growing, stacking like firewood ready to spark. I looked back at the window, curtains drawn, their shadows moving behind. They thought I was weak, ready to sign, too blind to notice. They were wrong. The days that followed bled into one another like ink soaking through paper. Morning light came thin and pale, stretching across my empty kitchen table, illuminating 2 chairs that once held conversation but now sat silent. The phone on the wall, yellowed with age, stayed still. No ring from Claire. No check-in from Richard. The silence was thicker than sound. I brewed coffee out of habit, the smell rich and bitter. But it only filled the room with reminders that no one else would drink it. I dialed Claire once, just once. The line rang, then her voice, clipped, polite, "Busy, Mom. We'll call later." Click. Later never came. By Wednesday, I drove past her house. The driveway overflowed with cars, headlights glowing, laughter spilling faintly into the street. A gathering. Family. My family. My chest tightened as I sat in my car, headlights off. Through the curtains I glimpsed shapes moving, plates passed, the golden light of fellowship. My invitation never came. I turned the key, engine rumbling, and drove home with tears blurring the stop signs. At the red light I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, the leather cold against my skin. My pulse throbbed. I remembered birthdays when Claire was small, balloons bobbing in corners, cake smeared across her cheeks. Back then she never celebrated without me. Now she celebrated by hiding me. Back home, the house breathed loneliness. The furnace kicked on with a sigh. I reheated chicken in the microwave, the hum filling the silence, then sat alone at the table. The meat was dry, flavorless. I chewed mechanically, my fork scraping against the plate. Even the sound echoed back at me like mockery. On Friday, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped, but it was only a package left at the stoop, my name scrawled crooked. No note, no voice. I stood there, the cool air brushing my face, and realized I had been waiting. For what? For someone to care enough to appear. That night I wandered the hallway, the floorboards creaking. I passed the framed photos Claire at graduation, cap tilted, me beaming beside her. Claire on her wedding day, veil glowing. I reached out, brushing the glass, dust cool under my fingertips. My reflection stared back, eyes rimmed red, hair thinner than I remembered. For a moment I didn't recognize myself. But then came Lily. The phone buzzed late Saturday, nearly 9. A small voice, trembling but warm. Grandma, can I come over tomorrow? I miss you. Relief spilled over me like water breaking a dam. Of course, sweetheart. Anytime. My throat ached, but I smiled into the receiver. On Sunday she came coat too big, sneakers squeaking against the tile. She hugged me tight, her hair smelling of apples and shampoo. For a moment, I remembered love untainted. Mom says you're tired. Lily whispered. Eyes wide I swallowed. Tired, maybe, but not gone. Don't believe everything you hear. She frowned, then dug into her backpack. Out came a crumpled drawing, me and her, side by side, holding hands beneath a crooked sun. I made this for you. Tears pricked my eyes. I pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. The paper crinkled under my hand, but it held firm. Proof I wasn't erased completely. When Lily left, the silence returned heavier, like waves crashing in. I walked to the porch. The night air was sharp, the sky studded with cold stars. My breath fogged before me. Across the street, neighbors gathered by a fire pit, their laughter carrying. I felt like a ghost watching the living. Inside, the walls pressed closer. I checked the phone again. No calls. Checked the mailbox, only bills. Claire had made her move, slowly cutting my ties, letting loneliness gnaw until I surrendered. But I would not. I opened the drawer and pulled out my journal, leather-worn, pages thick with years. I wrote down every slight, every silence, every missing dollar from my account. Proof layered on proof. My handwriting was jagged, but steady. The furnace rattled. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the ink smudged across my skin. Then I closed the book and held it against my chest. They thought invisibility would weaken me. But it sharpened me. I looked around my quiet house. The ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the drawing on the refrigerator. I whispered into the stillness, I am not gone, not yet! And then the phone buzzed again. Not Lily this time. A bank alert. Another transfer attempt flagged, denied but logged. My breath caught. They were still trying, even now. The silence broke, replaced by a new sound. The rising thrum of my own resolve. The dining room glowed with golden light, candles flickering along a polished oak table spread with roasted turkey, cranberry sauce, and pies that steamed sweet cinnamon into the air. It should have been comforting. It should have felt like family. Instead, it was a stage. Claire had invited me last minute, her voice on the phone brittle. Of course you can come, Mom, as if it were charity. Still, I arrived with my casserole dish balanced in trembling hands, its warmth seeping into my palms. Inside, laughter buzzed. Neighbors, cousins, Richard's coworkers. It seemed everyone had been invited. Everyone except me, until the final hour. I took my seat at the far end, near the sideboard stacked with extra plates. The chatter flowed around me like water around a rock. The turkey's skin gleamed bronze under the chandelier, knives clinked. Wine poured. I reached for the serving spoon, but Claire's hand darted first. She scooped meat onto plates, passing them around, skipping mine. I cleared my throat softly. Could I? Her voice cut sharp. Mom, be patient. You'll get your turn. Eyes shifted toward me. Some polite smiles, some smirks. My cheeks burned. I withdrew my hand, folding it into my lap. The smell of rosemary and sage filled my nose, but my stomach clenched too tight to hunger. Richard raised his glass. To family, and to new beginnings. His eyes slid down the table to me, a glint of something cruel flickering. And to letting go when it's time. Laughter rippled. My fork wavered in my grip. I stared at the plate before me, still empty. Claire leaned closer to the woman beside her, loud enough for half the table. Mom forgets things now. Papers, bills, appointments. We're helping before it gets worse. The words stabbed deeper than knives. Gasps. A murmur rose. Someone said softly, "Oh, bless her heart." I stiffened. I pay my bills on time? I said, my voice firm though my throat ached. Claire laughed lightly, her fork tapping her glass. Sure, Mom. Tell them about the checkbook? That's adorable. Heat flushed my face. My hands trembled under the tablecloth. Around me whispers, pity in some eyes, skepticism in others. I wanted to stand to scream, to overturn the dishes and expose their lies. Instead, I heard my mother's voice again. Proof, Evelyn. Proof before rage. The clink of silverware filled the pause. Someone coughed. Then Richard leaned back, smirking. She gets confused, but it's harmless. We just want what's best. My chest tightened. I forced a smile, brittle but sharp. Funny, I said, voice steady. I remember my account balance clearer than you do. Richard's smirk faltered. Just a flicker. Claire stiffened, eyes darting, then she laughed too loudly. Ignore her. Mom's being dramatic. But the shift was there, subtle. I had hit a nerve. I reached slowly for my casserole dish, scooping some onto my plate, the smell of mushrooms and cream comforting. I ate in silence, though my appetite was gone. Each bite was sand, but I chewed steadily, refusing to shrink. Across the table, Lily caught my gaze, my granddaughter's eyes, wide, worried, a flicker of love in the storm. She mouthed, I believe you. My throat thickened, but I nodded once. Conversation rose again, forced laughter covering cracks. Yet I saw them, Richard's clenched jaw, Claire's restless fingers against her wineglass. My words had unsettled them. A small victory. A reminder I wasn't powerless. Still, the damage was done. My reputation smeared in whispers, my dignity chipped before an audience. The smell of pumpkin pie turned sour in my memory, the glow of candles too bright, mocking. As dessert plates were cleared, I excused myself, slipping into the hallway. The mirror by the door reflected me, hair silver, eyes tired but burning still. Behind me, voices swelled, laughter loud, but I was no longer part of it. In the quiet, I pulled my phone from my purse. Notifications glowed, another bank alert, flagged activity. My jaw tightened. They were at it again even now, while I sat at their table like an ornament. I pocketed the phone, my hand steady. Proof was growing. Justice was inching closer. I adjusted my coat, the wool scratchy against my neck, and walked back in, chin high. Claire turned, her smile stiff. Richard avoided my eyes. I slid back into my chair, folding my napkin neatly. Thank you for dinner, I said, my voice even. It's important to remember who feeds the table. Silence dropped. A few forks froze midair. Claire's eyes narrowed. Richard's lips thinned. The room moved on quickly, but I felt it. The ripple, the shift. I wasn't invisible. Not yet. The humiliation burned, yes. But beneath it, a spark caught. They thought they had broken me in public. Instead, they gave me an audience. The humiliation of that dinner clung to me like smoke. Even after I washed my hair, changed the sheets, scrubbed my hands until my skin burned, it stayed. Their words echoed, forgetful, dramatic, tired. But humiliation has a way of sharpening the eyes. Once you've been stripped in public, you start noticing the hidden seams. It began with the mail. On Monday morning, I sorted through envelopes at the kitchen counter. Bills, catalogs, a holiday card from the church. Then I saw it, a medical statement with my name dated last month. But the treatments listed weren't mine. Physical therapy? I hadn't attended any. Someone had filed under my name. The paper crinkled as I held it tighter. My heart thumped. I checked the drawer where I kept my important papers, deeds, medical forms, my will. The folder was thinner. I pulled it out, spreading the contents across the table. One form, missing. Another replaced, a medical directive with a signature scrawled at the bottom. My name, but not my hand. I knew my pen strokes, the way my M curled. This was jagged, hurried, forged. My pulse raced. I sat back in the chair, the wood pressing hard against my spine. The kitchen light hummed above me, too bright. The smell of burnt toast lingered from breakfast, sharp and bitter. They think I won't notice? I whispered. My voice sounded foreign in the empty room. For hours I paced. The house creaked with every step. I checked drawers, boxes, the old cedar chest, pieces of my life tampered with, rearranged like a puzzle meant to confuse. By evening I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my coat and purse, keys rattling in my hand. The bank closed at 6. If I hurried, I could make it. The drive blurred, headlights streaking across the windshield. My breath fogged the glass. The radio stayed off. Silence roared louder than any song. The bank smelled of disinfectant and paper. Cold marble floor under my shoes. I approached the counter, hands gripping the strap of my purse. Can I help you? The teller smiled, polite but distracted. Yes, I said, forcing calm. I need to review recent account activity. She nodded, clicking keys, printing papers. The sound of the printer whirred, each page spitting out a piece of my truth. I scanned the statements there. Transfer attempts, just as my phone alerts had warned. Denied, yes, but repeated. Names attached, Claire?
Richard.
My throat tightened. Proof. The teller frowned. These were online requests, ma'am. Unusual, but flagged. I echoed. The word was bitter. Not stopped by honesty but by system error. I leaned closer. Ooh signed the authorization forms. She hesitated. I can get the manager. The office door opened. A man in a navy suit, silver hair, sharp eyes. He extended a hand. Mrs. Moore. Let's talk privately. Inside his office, the air smelled of ink and faint cologne. He spread more papers on the desk, tapping one form. This is the signature we received. I stared. My name again twisted, forged, the M wrong. The O too wide.
That's not me. I said, voice steady. He studied me.
I believe you. Relief loosened my chest. I hadn't realized I was braced for dismissal, for the same patronizing looks Claire used. We've placed holds on everything, he continued. But someone is trying hard. Family? The word hung in the air like a curse. Yes, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Then you'll want this. He slid a copy of the forged papers into a folder, sealing it. Proof. Keep it safe. I held the folder, its weight heavier than gold. Leaving the office, I walked slower. Each step echoed on the tile. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but I felt a clarity stronger than any glare. Outside, dusk painted the sky in bruised purples. My breath clouded in the chill. I gripped the folder to my chest as if it could warm me. In the car, I placed it on the passenger seat, buckling the strap as though it were a child. My hands shook, but not from fear now. From power. They thought I was blind. They thought invisibility would cover their tracks. But paper remembers. Ink tells the truth. The drive home felt different. Every red light was a drum beat. Every street lamp illuminated not my weakness but my witness. At home, I spread the papers on the table, smoothing each with careful fingers. Forged signatures, denied transfers, mismatched treatments. Layer upon layer of betrayal. I opened my journal and wrote. Proof grows. Justice waits. The furnace rumbled. The clock ticked. I heard the faint rush of wind through the eaves. The house was still, but inside me something stirred. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Small but real. Claire and Richard believed they had buried me beneath humiliation, silence, forgery. But I had unearthed them. Quietly, patiently, I gathered the papers back into the folder, sliding it under the floorboard beneath my bed. A hiding place no one knew. Then I whispered into the darkness. The game has changed. I didn't sleep that night. Not for 1 second. The clock's soft tick echoed louder than thunder. The old house creaked inside like it too was unsettled. Branches scratched the window pane, slow, deliberate, as if the trees themselves were whispering, "Don't ignore this." My chest tightened. Under the floorboard, the folder waited like a coiled snake. Inside, forged signatures, attempted transfers, misfiled treatments. Claire's voice recorded, crystal clear. She won't see it coming. Richard's smug laugh still clanged in my ears. I sat up. My hands were cold. I pushed off the quilt and stepped into the hallway barefoot. The wood was icy beneath my soles. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed as I filled it. I didn't need tea. I needed control. But I poured chamomile anyway. Routine steadied me. The lemon scent felt familiar, like something from when life still made sense. The mug trembled in my hand as I sat at the kitchen table. I pulled my journal close. Its leather cover was cracked, worn by years of grief and grocery lists. I wrote, tonight doesn't end me. Tonight begins the reckoning. Then I drew a line, underlined it 3 times. Step 1, lockdown, what is mine? Change pie-ins, freeze all accounts, transfer important assets, back up everything, twice. Step 2, 5, collect allies. Pastor Linda. Bank manager. Martin from the county clerk. Mabels, if she still remembers Tuesday's visit.
Step 3, time it right.
Don't confront yet. Let them walk deeper into their lie. Let justice feel like mercy until it isn't. I paused. My tea had gone cold. I stared at the steam rising from the sink where I washed the cup. My hands moved on autopilot, sponge, rinse, dry. I folded the towel neatly and placed it back on the rack. Domestic dignity, I called it. Then I checked the locks. Twice, the window latches, the back door, the floorboard. The folder was still there. My proof. I returned to the table and pulled out my recorder. Played back 10 seconds. Claire Vash, she trusts you, Richard. By Christmas, it'll all be ours. Sigh exhaled through my nose. Not today, dear. I opened the email alerts from the bank. Another transfer attempt. 11:04 p.m. denied. Same as before. Different account. They weren't stopping. I reached for my pen again. My fingers had steadied. I practiced saying it out loud. I am Evelyn Moore. These signatures are not mine. I did not authorize these transfers. Again, but slower. My name is Evelyn Moore. This is my house. This is my life. 12 words, clear, firm.
No stammer.
No tears. Court would not care for sentiment. It would care for evidence, order, confidence. The heater coughed to life behind me. I looked up at the family photos above the hallway entry. Claire at 10, arms covered in glitter. Claire at prom, in red lipstick I told her was too early. Claire on her wedding day, my pearls, my smile. And now she forged my name to bury me beneath her future. I wrote another line in the journal. Greed doesn't grow in strangers. It grows in the garden you watered yourself. I stood and grabbed the folder from the floorboard, added my ID, my pension stub, copies of property tax bills, slid it all into my purse. It looked heavier than usual. I set a second recorder inside, just in case. Near 3 a.m., I called Pastor Linda, left a message. Linda, it's Evelyn. I may need you as a witness tomorrow. Please? Call me in the morning. I checked the time again, 3:42 a.m. The courthouse opened at 9:30. I had 6 hours. I drew a timeline, every forged form, every alert, every suspicious conversation. I drew arrows, labeled each player. I circled the phrase deed transfer without consent to fraud, wrote it 3 times. At 4:12 a.m., a message came in from an unknown number of, "Bring your mother." Clerk confirmed. "We'll keep it short." My hands curled around the phone. They thought I'd walk into that courthouse like a lamb, ready to hand over my house, my freedom, my name. They didn't know what I'd built in the silence. At 5:30, I made a peanut butter sandwich. Not because I was hungry, because my body needed something real. I poured a glass of milk. I watched snow start to fall, dusting the street in white lies. At 600 sharp, I opened the drawer and pulled out the wool coat Charles gave me on our 30th anniversary. It still fit, still smelled of cedar, still warm, but it no longer comforted me. I grabbed my folder, zipped it into the inner pocket of my purse, then paused. One last thing. I reached for the mirror above the coat rack, looked myself in the eye. My hair was wild, my cheeks hollow, my jaw tight, but my eyes, they were clear, cold, ready. I whispered to my reflection, "You are not helpless. You are not the one who forgot love. They are." Then I turned off the kitchen light, locked the door, and stepped into the morning. Snow crunched beneath my boots. My breath hung in the air like a question. My car groaned to life. I placed the folder beside me in the passenger's seat, buckled it in. The absurdity made me smile, but I let the smile stay. At the corner, a school bus passed. Children pressed their faces to the glass. I waved at them, and one waved back. I used to wave like that from the bus too. Before bills, before betrayal, before my name became a target. Today, I wasn't a passenger anymore. I was the driver. The bank smelled like artificial pine and old receipts. I walked in with my purse hugged close and my folder pressed to my ribs like a lifeline. A bell chimed, and the security guard nodded without interest. The lobby was quiet except for a muted financial news broadcast on the wall-mounted screen. I had called ahead. Bank manager Alvarez, Dora, met me near the customer service window. She wore her usual burgundy blazer and a name tag that read "Ask Me Anything." Today I would. We walked to her glassed-in office at the back. Frosted corners tried to soften the feeling that your money and dignity were behind glass. "Ms. Moore," she said gently. "Have a seat." The chair was too soft and swallowed my posture. I adjusted, squared my spine. I opened the folder and slid 3 pages forward, forged signatures, alert printouts, bank emails. Then, I pulled up the audio recording on my phone. "I didn't play it yet." "First," I said, voice low, "I want to freeze every account I share, even in name only, with my husband, effective immediately. I want new PINs. I want verification on every withdrawal over $50. Dora blinked, but she nodded. "Of course, may I ask?" "I believe there's been misconduct. I have documentation, and I've initiated legal consultation. For now, I'm just protecting my assets." She didn't press. She tapped her keyboard. "We'll need verbal confirmation to revoke his access, but based on your statements, we can pause activity and mark the accounts for compliance review." I handed her my ID. My hands didn't tremble. "Do it." As she typed, I looked down at the chained pen on her desk. It bobbed gently, as if unsure whether to swing or be still. A metaphor if I'd ever seen one. She printed a form. "Sign here and again here. These remove auto, debit authority from both Claire and Mr. Moore on the shared savings." I signed. The pen scratched louder than I expected. My name looked strange in ink today, firmer, less apologetic. Next, I requested a copy of the safety deposit box ledger. Claire had added herself to my emergency box a year ago, just in case. I revoked that access. The form required a notary. Dora signed and stamped it herself. We worked silently for 10 minutes. I caught her glancing at me once, not with pity, but with a kind of respect. I didn't explain. When I left, she handed me a sealed envelope. "Here's your updated portfolio." "And Ms. Moore?" "Yes." Most folks don't act until it's too late. You're right on time. The cold air outside wrapped around me like a shawl. Sharp cleansing. I walked slowly to the car, folder tucked under my arm, as if reclaiming more than money, as if reclaiming spine. Next stop, the clerk's office. Martin was expecting me. His voice over the phone had been both surprised and urgent. He met me at the side entrance to avoid the public counters. His office smelled like toner and burnt coffee. "I got a fax yesterday morning," he said, flipping through a folder. "From Claire's office. A draft of a deed reassignment request and a durable power of attorney. Nothing submitted yet, but it had your name typed." I nodded. "They were going to rush me in today. Sign without reading. I just wanted to pet Lily's dog. That was the excuse." Martin cursed under his breath. "I need to preempt this?" I said, "Can I file a motion to delay any property or health-related assignments until legal review?" He handed me a form. "Fill that. Also this affidavit stating you are of sound mind and object to any third-party filings made without your written notarized consent." I brought my own, I said, and slid mine across the table. Martin smiled. "We worked for 30 minutes. I read everything, signed everything. No more blind trust. Not even with the clerk I'd known for 20 years. When it was done, I exhaled. "Do you want a copy for your records?" Martin asked. "Yes, and a digital one too." "Email and USB." He smiled again. "Evelyn, you're a fortress this morning?" I shrugged into my coat. "No, I'm just awake." On the drive home, I stopped at the UPS store and made 5 copies of every important document. I bought a small fireproof safe. The cashier offered to carry it. I declined. Once home, I tucked it behind the bookshelf, changed the alarm code, then I sat down in the living room, where the morning light bled gently through the curtains. The air smelled of cold dust and cinnamon, the candle I hadn't lit since last winter. I opened Claire's old scrapbook. It had Lily's baby footprints, Claire's wedding invitation, a photo of the 3 of us at the lake. I turned to a newer page and placed a copy of the property deed. My name still mine. A vibration broke the silence. My phone, voicemail. Unknown number. I tapped play. A soft voice filled the room, nervous, young. "Hi, Grandma. It's Lily. I know Mommy said you were too tired to come by anymore, but I saw your scarf in our hallway today. You left it here after the pie. Mommy told me not to mention it, but I just wanted to say I miss you. That's all." There was a pause. "Oh, and I saw Grandpa whispering with Mommy in the kitchen. I think he said something about court. I don't know. I just wanted you to know." "Okay, bye." The line went silent. I sat still. My scarf. Claire said she hadn't seen me in weeks, but Lily knew. Lily remembered. I closed my eyes. For the first time in days, my heart cracked, but not from betrayal, from a thread of love. Small.
Real?
Still pulsing. I looked at the recorder again. Maybe I wasn't completely alone. "Let's begin," Evelyn said. The county clerk, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tie, cleared his throat. "We're here to review documents related to property reassignment and updated healthcare authority." Miss Claire Whitman submitted preliminary forms. But before anything is signed or processed, all parties must verify willingly, and in sound state of mind. Evelyn gave a small nod. Claire leaned forward, syrup in her voice. "It's just a technical update. You know, for peace of mind." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Whose mind?" Richard snorted. "Oh, come on, Evelyn. You've been under a lot of stress. We're just trying to help you streamline things." She opened her folder. Quietly, 1 page at a time, she began sliding documents across the table. "This," she said, "is a notarized affidavit confirming I did not request any power of attorney changes." She passed another. "This is a freeze order from my bank, halting all joint account access pending investigation into forgery." Another. "A revocation of all previously granted permissions, filed with Martin Reed yesterday morning." The clerk frowned, lifting each page. His eyes moved faster with every sheet. Richard's fingers stopped tapping the table. Claire's smile faltered. "Mom, what is this?" Evelyn reached for her phone. "I'd rather not speak over anyone. Let me let you speak instead." She tapped play. Claire's voice filled the small room. "If Mom signs over the house, you'll finally be free." Then Richard's drawl. "She won't even notice." "She trusts me?" The audio ended. Silence. The only sound was the fluorescent light's buzz and the slight creak as Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Claire's face drained of color. You were spying?" "I was witnessing," Evelyn said. "There's a difference." Richard stood suddenly, chair screeching. "This is ridiculous." "You're twisting everything?" "I don't have to twist anything," she replied. You did that yourselves? The clerk cleared his throat. I need to verify these documents against the previous submissions. Evelyn nodded. Take your time. She looked down at her lap. Her gloves rested neatly there. The leather still smelled faintly of cedar. She remembered Claire as a toddler, chewing the corner of one of her gloves while Evelyn waited at the doctor's office. The child who once depended on her had grown into a woman who plotted her erasure. The clerk spoke again. Ms. Moore, I see you've already filed new deed protections, updated ownership transfer protocols. That places this current reassignment on legal hold.
Yes,
Evelyn said, and I've placed my assets into an irrevocable trust. Managed independently? Claire jolted. You? What? I moved the house, my retirement accounts, and the safe deposit box into protected holdings last week. Before you tried this, before you called the clerk, Richard glared. So this is war now? Evelyn met his gaze. No, this is a ceasefire with terms. The clerk stood. Given the audio evidence, prior filings, and Ms. Moore's notarized statements, I'm advising legal counsel involvement before any further motion. I'll also add a fraud alert to the family file. If a third party attempts anything else, it will be flagged. Claire's chair creaked as she slumped back. Her lip trembled. Mom, how could you do this to us? I could ask the same, Evelyn said softly. But we're family, Claire whispered. Evelyn folded her gloves carefully. Family does not mean ownership. Richard opened his mouth, but Evelyn raised a hand. You've said enough. This appointment is over. She stood, picked up her folder, tucked the documents inside like they were ingredients for peace or armor for war. As she reached the door, the clerk called out, Ms. Moore. She turned. You may want to prepare. They might try to contest this. Evelyn glanced back at her daughter. The woman who once held her hand at the beach, now clutching her phone like a lifeline she no longer controlled. Let them try, Evelyn said. I have the truth, and that's heavier than any lie. The hallway outside was quiet. Her boots tapped calmly on the tile. Her spine was straight, her pulse steady. She passed a bulletin board covered in flyers, free flu shots, tax prep volunteers, lost dog posters. She paused before the exit door, took a breath, the kind of breath you take before turning a page. Outside, the cold bit hard, but she was warm. She didn't go straight home. She stopped at the diner down the street, the one she and Charles used to visit on Sundays, before Claire stopped calling, before Richard started looking through her mail. She ordered black coffee and 2 eggs over medium. The waitress asked if she wanted toast. Evelyn said yes. As she stirred the coffee, she thought about what the clerk had said. Retaliation? Let them try. They didn't know the strength that lived inside silence. She had survived winter nights without heat, hospital shifts with no breaks, and a husband who turned from her without blinking. She'd survive this too. The eggs arrived. She smiled, picked up her fork, and took a bite. Salted. Warm. Real, like justice. By noon, Evelyn had cleared the mantel. She left only one photo, a picture of Emily at age 6, holding a dandelion like a secret. The child had grown quiet over the years, disappearing after her mother remarried and Claire tightened her circle like a fist. But Evelyn always remembered her gentle laugh and the way she used to tuck notes into Evelyn's apron when she thought no one was looking. A knock came at the door, soft, uncertain. She opened it slowly. It was the mailman handing over a padded envelope. No name on the return address. Inside, Evelyn found a cheap birthday card with glittered flowers and the words, "Thinking of you." It was unsigned, but she recognized Claire's handwriting on the envelope. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another performance. Evelyn placed the card on the kitchen counter and turned away. The window above the sink framed the neighbor's oak tree, now stripped bare for winter. She stood there until the phone rang. A name she hadn't seen in 2 years, Emily. Her voice was warm, tentative. On Evie, I heard what happened. I don't know all the details, but I know enough. I'm sorry. Evelyn sat down slowly. You don't have to apologize for them. I'm not, Emily said. I'm sorry I stayed away. A pause. I'm in town, she added. Can we meet? Evelyn gave the name of a small park not far from the courthouse, a place with an old iron bench under 2 sycamore trees. She hadn't visited since Charles stopped walking without a cane. When Evelyn arrived, Emily was already there, her hair pulled back, coat buttoned high. She stood when she saw Evelyn but didn't rush. No theatrics, no hug forced out of guilt. They sat side by side. The bench was cold. Evelyn felt it through her coat, but Emily offered one of her gloves without a word. She took it. For a few minutes they said nothing. Just watch the wind ripple through brittle grass. Then Emily spoke. I remember you used to bring me here with a red thermos of cocoa. You told me the leaves whispered if I listened hard enough. Evelyn smiled. And did they? I think so. They told me to come back. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded note. This was in Mom's purse. I don't think she meant for me to see it. But it was a list, with your name at the top, and numbers next to it. Evelyn's jaw tensed. Emily nodded. I think it was a plan, or maybe it was proof, but she kept it. Even after the hearing, Evelyn took the paper, folded it again without looking. Thank you. Emily looked down at her boots. You deserved better? Evelyn's throat caught. She blinked away the burn in her eyes. I did, but I'm getting it now. They walked together slowly. Leaves crunched beneath them. At one point, Emily took Evelyn's hand, not out of habit, but intention. They walked like that all the way back to the gate, where they paused. Emily turned to her. You don't have to forgive anyone yet, or ever, but if you need someone to walk with you for a while. I'd like that, Evelyn said. That evening, the house breathed differently. Not quieter, not louder. Just alive, Evelyn lit a candle in the living room. Not the usual cinnamon or clove, but clean lavender. She opened the window an inch and let the air move freely. Then she went to the desk in the study. She hadn't sat there in months. She pulled out a new spiral notebook, untouched. On the first page, she wrote, "This is mine." She underlined it twice, then she paused. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't writing for explanation, or to beg, or to be understood. She was writing to begin. They sat on the porch steps, sipping their tea. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was lived in, like an old quilt pulled over familiar shoulders. I forgot how quiet it is here, Emily finally said. Evelyn smiled. That's because no one's trying to talk over your breath. Emily chuckled. And no one's asking for bank transfers with a smile. Evelyn let the joke settle. Then, do you regret coming back? Emily shook her head. I regret staying away. They watched the lake for a while, where sunlight danced along the surface like someone whispering forgiveness. Later that morning, Evelyn walked to the library, a small brick building nestled behind a row of sugar maples. She had signed up to volunteer 2 weeks ago. Not out of obligation but desire, it was story time today. 3 children sat in a semicircle, wiggly and wide-eyed. Evelyn picked a book she loved from long ago, The Secret Garden. As she read, the room softened. Her voice, once overlooked in her own home, now carried magic. The smallest child leaned forward, eyes wide. Another one laughed at the robin's voice. When the reading ended, one little girl whispered, "Will you come back next week?" Evelyn nodded. I promise. Back home, she found Emily in the kitchen kneading dough. It's supposed to be scones, Emily said, flour dusting her cheek. Evelyn tied on her apron. Let's see what kind of trouble we can bake. They worked side by side, music playing low, Aretha Franklin, then Joni Mitchell. At one point, Evelyn hummed along. Emily raised an eyebrow. You sing, I survive, Evelyn replied, smiling. That afternoon, they brought the warm scones to the porch. Evelyn poured them both fresh tea, lemon balm this time. The scent floated gently in the summer air. Emily pulled a worn journal from her bag. I've been writing more. It helps. Good, Evelyn said. Words save me too. The sun dipped behind the treetops. The world grew quieter, not emptier. Just full of softer things. Emily turned toward her aunt. So what now? Evelyn reached under her chair and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, sealed. This is my new will, she said. Emily's eyes widened. You're listed. Evelyn continued. But not for what you think. The house and money? They'll go to charity. But I'm leaving you something else? Emily looked confused. The deed to this land includes the cabin next door. It's small, needs paint. But it's yours if you want it. Emily blinked. Why me? Evelyn sipped her tea. Because you stayed when you didn't have to, and because I see a version of myself in you. Before I gave too much away. Emily reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Evelyn added, Don't lose yourself for love, child, and don't sell your dignity for family discounts. Choose who gets to sit at your table. They sat in the last light of day. The screen door creaked open as the wind shifted. A bird landed on the railing, cocking its head at them. Evelyn laughed quietly. It's not revenge that lasts, she said, more to herself than anyone. Emily looked at her. What does? Dignity, Evelyn whispered. And love chosen freely. Some stories end with doors slammed. Mine ends with one quietly left open. Not for those who broke me, but for those who showed up when I didn't ask. I didn't lose everything. I traded noise for peace, control for clarity. And in the quiet, I found a stronger voice. Now I ask you, dear listener, what would you do if the people you love tried to erase you? Share your story in the comments. Because silence isn't strength. Truth is, and you're not alone.